Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Crow, multimedia editor at Progressive Grocer. Welcome to Top Women in Grocery, a podcast focused on the trends, topics, and interests that move women forward in grocery retail. We're spotlighting extraordinary women in the grocery industry who have had successful careers and interesting lives, and who are also making a positive impact in their workplaces and in their communities. Today, we're talking to Jordan Schenk from Flashfood. She was recently elevated to the role of Chief Customer Officer at the company and has hit the ground running in her new position. We're excited to have her here today to discuss Flashfood's new visual identity, the intersection of B2B and B2C, the art of a great deal, and more. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
Of course. Well, to start, I'm hoping you can tell us a bit about your career journey and how you landed at both Flashfood and in your new role.
Definitely. I have had I would say, a really interesting path that landed me on the side of grocery. I definitely was not born into it. I did not start my career in it, but I found myself here, I would say, just by way of passion in terms of what interests me most, not only sort of in the world, interesting problems to solve, but just by way of really amazing people that I get the chance to work with has sort of kept me going through it. My earliest ambitions in my career, I actually had this big vision that I was going to go work in finance doing M&A in China, which netted me in a completely different path when I found myself in New York City and started to sort of run the route of consulting, found myself in advertising, worked at a shop called Wieden & Kennedy for a while where I was doing some bigger strategic work for some of these Mondo CPG brands with, billion-dollar global advertising budgets, which was a really cool experience. That sort of got me attracted in what happens with brands in the food space, I would say. Just in terms of one, how many folks engage with these brands, but two, the impact they have on culture and how they can shift culture, change culture. Essentially, your day starts and finishes with food. Really, really interesting space. I then found myself leading marketing, consumer marketing, sort of across the map at Impossible Foods, through developing the go-to-market strategy and just launching this product that essentially changed the way we all thought about plant-based.
Absolutely.
And then dabbled in being a founder myself, and then honestly found myself on the board of Flashfood for about 6 months until we had our CEO, Nick, join, and the board and everyone sort of convinced me to come in and, shoot another shot at trying to make a sort of global consumer movement. So it's been bouncy as all get out, but it's always been sort of the through line of it has always been my own passion and curiosity. That's what I feel is the connectedness. Output and space may be different.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely plenty of that to look for in the food industry.
Yeah.
Well, you recently took on the newly created role of Chief Customer Officer at Flashfood. What will that position entail, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, so the way that we think about customer at Flashfood is twofold. We have what we call our shoppers, which are our consumers. There's a consumer-facing marketplace. We also have our retailers, which are the folks that are bringing in our product, putting food on the platform, sharing our stories, sharing mutual goals of eliminating food waste. And that's sort of the gamut of my core customers, if you will. So what I do at the organization sort of spans that entire experience, from the insights that we mine to the campaigns we put forward to the comms, the government relations, and I would say even, the customer success side of it that runs all through it. It's truly having that entire ecosystem exist together. And so there's a lot of exciting things going on at any given point. I would say my team in and of itself holds the sort of voice and spirit of our customers within the work they do.
And what does it mean to have that sort of customer-centric role within a company that provides solutions to the retail industry? Like you said, the customer is twofold for you. So it must be interesting how that all is interconnected.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, philosophically, I've always looked at like B2B versus B2C as in some ways one and the same, because we're all customers, we're all shoppers of brands at the end of the day. And I think if I think back even to my time at Impossible, strategically, we weren't there's messaging that's nuanced, but I would sort of call it the position and the brand, the sentiment, the feel, the experience is consistent between the two. And I think you were looking for, I mean, that's the philosophical way that I look at it. What was sort of the other part of the question?
Yeah, just how having that sort of role within a company that provides solutions for the retail industry, what that means.
Yeah. So that, I mean, specifically, there's one side of it where when I'm having conversations with our retail partners, there's the piece where I know the data and the behavior that we're going to see and expect from our customers. And I think something, more recently that's been really exciting to find out as we've sort of matched our data with that of data that we found in spaces like Numerator, is that we can actually see, when a retailer takes on Flashfood, not only is it an amazing solution for your shrink, for waste, for your sustainability goals, it's actually a traffic driver. So what we were able to find in sort of matching that without, data that's not just our own stated data, is that for retailers that bring us in customers that have either never shopped or infrequently shopped are now returning to the store 1.2 times more a month. And I think that's been we sort of came to that insight end of year last year. And that, again, there's that connectedness where I'm understanding consumer behavior, but it's actually translates into what could potentially drive results in ways that retailers can think about solutions like us in a different way, where it's this amazing benefit on one side of it, but it's also like, I don't know what advertising campaign can say that's the result that you're going to see when you bring it in. And so I think that's what's really cool about having it all in one place for the team. And I would say for myself as well, is that we're thinking about it on both sides. And that's really how you have to think about solving this. I mean, we're expecting a new behavior, new infrastructure on the retailer side. It's the same thing for the customer. And if you're not drawing that connection, you're not sort of moving it forward in a much more in sync way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also recently led Flashfood through the launch of a new brand visual identity. I'm curious what you can tell us about that process and the goals behind that refresh.
Yeah, so that was it was like my day one sort of, I would say, task or briefing, was that there was a couple things that needed to happen. One, the visual identity needed to sort of take space in a more contemporary way, and also a way visually that's on par with how we want products and goods to show up in retail. The other part of it was, how do we position the company for that exponential growth? Because as we're seeing consumer trends around, leading with things around sustainability or climate impact are important, but they're not necessarily driving the sale, right? Like when you start to get further down the chain, it helps with loyalty, it helps with repeat, it helps with sort of middle funnel work that needs to be done. The rebrand in and of itself was one of the faster rebrands I've done. And I would also say shoestring. I'll add that now, which I, in all honesty, prefer things to move quick, to focus on what's important in terms of what you invest in. I often think that you can pull together some really interesting creativity with constraints. So we did all of that work to reposition it, and then move forward with bringing in an external agency to redo the creative refresh. We actually did the strategy, I would say partially in-house. We worked with an amazing brand strategist by the name of Stephen Ebert, who just understands, I would say, the heart and soul of sort of these transformative moments that businesses go through, to ultimately tee up the work with an agency we work with named Porta Rocha. And we had to stay relatively tight to deadlines to make it happen. And I think what was, really beautiful in the process where you are selecting the agency, we really focused on, we had amazing talent that came forward, and we just really focused on sort of that, I would almost say like a personal connection to the creative groups. And a lot of times when I've done rebrands, you're always thinking about who's going to like the magnitude of results or the sort of fact that they've won awards and all of those things, which folks that we were looking at did, but we really focused on who cared about this, who understands the sort of nuance of what we're trying to do. I think we're in the business of obviously helping our retailers find a solution to food that they would otherwise be throwing out or yellow stickering, but we're also looking to build a consumer movement around how we think and frame our sort of brains around what truly is food, like when can I eat it, what's good. And it's, I kept thinking through the whole process, if vintage fashion has like had its grand return to that of like Gen Z and pretty much anyone, I would say now, why wouldn't we think about food waste sort of not like in the context of that, like it's truly the Goldilocks window of something ready to eat and priced perfectly.
Right.
That just feels like interesting and special in the same way that we're sort of seeing some of these other circular trends emerge. So we ran with it, and we knew in the positioning that we wanted the business to bring this levity and this feeling of excitement and play and joy, because that's what we bring into our retailers. Our marketplace is a portal for them to take something that's often like not seen as positive and transform it into something that's interesting and exciting. And we were seeing on platform, people buying 10 pounds of peppers for no foreseeable reason, but then they would convert it into pepper jam and go to their local church and hand out all of their pepper jam that they happened to get to make. Or you'd hear stories of people who wanted to host a birthday party and they thought they could only buy one pie, but they were able to buy 5 pies for the price of one. So they were able to invite more friends. And like that levity that happens in our experience, that sense of abundance is just, it's so beautiful. And that I know that our retailers want to tell those stories. I know that customers are interested. Like that's a TikTok video waiting to happen. So like, how do we just create something that sparks that? And that was sort of really the brief and goal. And I think I've been just really proud to see sort of the shape of that come to life.
Great. I love that. Well, you and I talked about a bit previously, and you also mentioned how Flashfood sits at the intersection of business to business and business to consumer, because your clients or your customers are two different people, basically. How did that factor into the new visual identity, and how do you navigate the differences between those two segments?
Definitely. I think the visual identity in and of itself, there's definitely I would say there's the wrapper of like, how do we make this, templatized and professional on one end of it. And then there's the other side of it, which is like, how crazy can we go on TikTok and Instagram? So much of the identity is actually very intentional and you'll see it come to life. And like on the consumer end, we're very UGC led. We're very focused on showing our consumers. We're actually very focused on showing our retailers too, and telling those stories in a raw way. Like our identity, we knew would stretch for that. In the same way that, we were just at FMI last week and we had this sort of gorgeous promotional booth that was running, information with stats. It looked incredibly clean. It looked, well polished. And so I think visually we can flex it, the biggest differences that we see just come down to messaging. And when we think about what sort of value propositions hit where, I think what's always been interesting in any value prop is that Flashfood, whether you're talking B2B or B2C, sort of hits the win-win-win. It's just different pieces that go into it. Like, it's a win for your business. It's a win for your brand image. It's a win for your sustainability goals. For customers, it's a win for your wallet. It's a win for your image and what you can share out in the world. And it's a win because you're doing something great for your community, for your planet, but you didn't really have to think about it that hard because we were here to help you. So there's a lot of mirroring in that, and it's just backfilling it with various statistics. I do think creatively, and this is again more to come as we bring more out in terms of some of our B2B campaigns, that creativity is not limited to either side.
Yeah.
I think what oftentimes happens on the B2B side is we're like, save the creativity for the consumers.
Right. Just do the bare bones
and
make it simple.
That's not the business that we're in at all. So we came out of the conference last week and I was immediately thinking, like, if I had the booth next year, I would have that run as a pop-up. Like, yes, we would sell, but like, what interesting musical artist could I have come, like, how can I make this feel like how, we would sort of, and again, in the consumer goods space, you get a little bit flashier, but how do I get inspired by some of those folks that are creating those experiences for people that are sort of on either side? Because again, like, we're all customers. We all know, some of us like to wear Nike. Some of us wear, we all consume brands. So that's, again, there's much more to be developed there, but I'm actually excited to see, I'm very excited to see the creativity that we'll bring to some more of those industry centric things. Cause that's the stuff that actually gets me excited. I'm like, how can I make you leave this moment or like see this piece of creative on LinkedIn that you're like, wow, that actually stood out, versus like, you're just running your sort of usual stats around selling or retention, what have you, which we would absolutely do. But there's there's a lot of ways to play.
Right. There can be more to it. I think that's something I hear a lot, is that we are all consumers. So we like to be sold to just as a consumer would, even if we're on the B2B side. I think that's really interesting. Great. Well, something else that you mentioned earlier, in terms of, vintage being back and everything. One aspect of Flashfood's value proposition for consumers is the ability to get a great deal. How are you and the company working to reinvigorate the beauty of a deal and sort of capturing that audience that is looking to get a great deal?
Totally. I'm very passionate about making deals something of interest. I think that over time, deal is like, it's twofold. Like in some places, it's like a bit of a deal is like a dirty word, like don't shop a deal because it's not perceived as premium. And then in other communities, it's like the golden goose. Like, why would you not shop a deal? And I think that there's a ton of space. And I think about some of, like, if you remember like the early days of like when Walmart sort of first came out with some really interesting play, creativity, language around that. Like I remember that moment when, like the little smiley face would run around the store. And like, if you also remember, like deals were at one point blue light specials. Like if you remember that sort of like light, like these very like vintage
they
moments.
Would change the pricing and everything. Yeah.
Where it was exhilarating and exciting. And for some reason we sort of like, as a society, have kind of like shifted away from how magical that can be. And I think that what you're finding is probably a lot of brands are trying to figure out like, how do I manifest that in culture that doesn't like cheapen my brand? I would hear that a lot when I was on the bigger side of advertising, working with retailers in fashion. It would always be the question of like, how do we run a deal? How frequently can we, but we can't have it cheapen the perception of quality. Good thing is I've had done that time and time again for fashion retailers. So now it's like looking at grocery again and saying, how can I make this feel as, attractive? And so we've got a ton of cool things coming out. I mean, in terms of like how we mobilize that on social media. And I think a lot of it is just not being afraid to play and to like play into the kind of campiness that it can be, which is like really cool. Like that's actually seen as cool. And letting people be proud of it. And I think what we often find is we don't give space for people to be like, because I shopped a deal, I filled we have a lot of people who will like fill their really cool like cellars that they've straight up made with like canning goods. And I'm just like, that is so cool. Like that is like so cool for content. Like tell us how you do that.
Yeah.
In the same way that you hear folks come on and they're like, I got a family of 6. I bought these things on Flashfood. I was able to create like a taco soup that fed my family of 6 for $17 for like
That's
3
amazing.
days. And I'm like, if you can take a meal and create like a really beautiful, good meal and do that, like that is just like, that's stories to be told. So and again, that's like the outcome of a deal is so beautiful. Or if you fixed your roof, you fixed your car, like let's celebrate it.
Yeah.
So there's so much more that's like coming. And I know we're just like, we're not even a week out from a rebrand and I can like see the content stream. I don't want to like,
wonderful.
I can't share all the work before it comes out because I'll get in trouble, I think. But yeah, folks
more to come.
See it. More to come.
Yeah. Well, speaking of what's upcoming, with everything going on at Flashfood and even in the grocery industry as a whole, what else are you looking forward to most in the coming year?
I look forward to, we'll be turning on new markets. So it always gets me really excited as we show up in new places. And, we know in our world, regionality is it's such a reality. And I think that I get excited from a customer standpoint to sort of learn and explore new customers on either side. So there's a lot, there's just like physically showing up. We move into launch mode again this year, and launch mode is just, it's always funny because you sort of at a startup this stage, everyone's like, what's your sort of cyclical campaign? And I'm like, launch.
Right.
And then we've got a couple of like really good meaty calendar moments, but like we're sort of moving on that front. We'll have some of our first sort of campaign work as a brand come out this year, which is, I always think of as huge moments for businesses when you're doing sort of that collective storytelling in a really special way. What else? We've got a really cool study coming for our impact report, really digging into food insecurity and what some new fresh data looks like there, how solutions and waste can solve that without like fully alluding to it like 4 times over in terms of like what that can look like. So those are things that I get really excited about. And so much more. I could just go through my list. I was like, I'm just doing me just like pull up my task list. And here are the things. We have a lot of, and then I would say the other part of it is we're doing some really cool stuff around our product itself this year. And something that also sits within my organization is sort of the design and UX side of our product. So we're looking at that, studying that in new ways, and hopefully coming forward with some really special rollouts to just make that customer experience on the tech side so much richer for both products.
Yeah. Very cool. So more to come.
I immediately changed my Slack status to be like back in building because I was traveling for 2 weeks, and it's just like this constant mode of building and creating. And it's, for me, it's the most fun place to be. It's also scary. I think for some, it's like completely ambiguous, and you're sort of like making all of this out of like seemingly nothing that's there. But it's just, that's what I love. And I think that, talk to me in like 24 months and ask me how tired I am by the end of it. But that's the fun part. And I think people feel it. I was excited coming out of last week with the rebrand. People were like, whoa, like, that's a totally different feel. And I'm like, just wait.
Well, it sounds like you're in the right place as far as all of the new things happening and your excitement for it. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, finally, I'm hoping you can share some advice with other women out there looking to sort of climb the corporate ladder or get ahead in their careers. You've been, in lots of different iterations of your career. So I'm just curious what you can share.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for me has always been, how do I let my passion drive what I ultimately sort of want to do? And that in many ways has bared fruit in terms of like what roles and responsibilities I have. But I would say, you'd put me in a room and you could have me talk about metrics or this program, but if you can feel the excitement and the passion from someone, that oftentimes really helps sort of mobilize how you move throughout your career. Yeah. That's really important. It's actually easier said than done, because oftentimes things that we're passionate about could be completely different to what we're doing today. And I have been in a number of situations where I have taken like really sort of seemingly uncalculated and messy risks to do something that, puts everything that you've built in this one area sort of on the line, or like you have to network into this whole other area. Yeah. And I've been in a lot of those situations where it's like the first wave is like fear, but then as I've sort of moved through it, it actually creates that like really special flywheel of like getting to a point where you're deeply passionate about what you're doing. You're in a really amazing role, whether it's leadership or as a contributor. You feel like that role is not going to burn you out because you're so passionate about what you're doing that it just continues to fuel it. And I think that's what's been helpful. And I think I told you before we chatted, like I've had the benefit of context switching. And I think context switching, I've been on the advertiser side, right? Like big giant thinking. I've been on the sort of, call it venture consultative side. I went in and launched a CPG. I went in and started my own business. I came back onto the tech service side. Which again, like if you put it all in that sort of isolation, seems completely chaotic, but when it manifests, it's in service of each other, and it's always finding that way to do it. So I think it's important to do that. At least it's been important for my journey, and it's helped me sort of get to where I am. And as my team would tell you, they always say this to me, like, Jordan's best in a crisis because she's just like cool as a cucumber. And I was like, it's because I've literally seen it all from all sides of it. And what I've always seen is that, the sort of good outcome always wins in the sort of face of like a challenge or fear. It's just about sort of the energy you put into it. For whatever reason, the universe will always help you along. Yeah. And it's like we were talking about earlier, we're women, we do it. We get it done. That's what we do. We just get it done. We're just, and we look at that. It's like when you have kids, you're like, oh, you just broke that entire really expensive thing over there. Well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? Right. We're going to move on. We're going to move. We're going to sweep it up. We're going to try to sweep it up together. But if it's class, maybe I'll do it. And then we'll just learn not to put expensive, breakable things that low. Yes. We figure it out. We do. Wonderful. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for being here with us today. Of course. This is really fun. And I'm always open, for folks listening. If, I've got a LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to me, ask questions, I actually really do my best to respond to everyone that I get to, as long as it's not like some cold call, like somehow you got my number, SaaS sort of thing. But not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just, it's there. But for folks that want to reach out to me, happy to like always spitball or pump up or think through stuff. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, of course. For more information about the Top Women in Grocery podcast, please visit www.progressivegrocer.com/podcasts. You can also subscribe to the series wherever you typically listen to podcasts, including on Apple, Google, and Spotify. And if you have any ideas for a Twig podcast topic, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at ecrow@ensembleiq.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening.